82 games, bro. And how we look at it is, why not have 82 wins? Look, there's going to be shit games like that game against the Rockets, but there's always something you can learn. So let's just go ahead and start with the obvious shit, bro. We had back-to-back overtime games. We were able to overcome one of them and get the win. Two good teams, the Nuggets and the Bulls. And then we go on the road for a back-to-back. But we left our homes. I mean, we must have packed before the game. Left after the game. What a shitty road trip out there to the Rockets. And somehow the Rockets are suddenly playing good. So we run into that. And for the first time ever, I look at the Rockets roster construction and I go, okay, maybe they're making something that makes a little bit of sense. But in the end, I still like what we got. Yeah, it wasn't the best game, and the 16-point deficit or whatever we lost by wasn't actually really, we were down by 20, 25, close to 30 at some point. So we closed pretty strong, but that was not the best game. So let's just say a couple things about it and then just move the fuck on. Because look, no matter what, we're playing 82 games this season. We're going to find 82 wins. We're going to find things to talk about every game.
Yeah, and if you add Shai's 7 more minutes a game and Josh's 7 more minutes, and you throw in, Poku playing more of the game, I think all of a sudden this is a different scenario. But the reality is that, like Mark said, back-to-back overtime games, a team like Houston, say what you want, you don't want to go out and overexert yourself with them. And that's just what we ran into last night or the other night. I'm not upset at all. I don't think it's anything to get crazy about, but it's insane to me because I was listening to a podcast this morning, trying to get amped up for our podcast and talking about it, and I could not believe what I was hearing. It was this almost anti-ex-player, we won't even say what player it is, but ex-player bullshit talk. It really riled me up, and I am sitting there just like, what the fuck? And about 20 minutes ago or so, a few hours ago, whatever, Thunder Moneyball posted something, and I'm not Thunder Moneyball he's a harsh critic. He's incredibly intelligent when he talks about this team and the players that are being ready versus not being ready. But what he has to say here is something that I agree with him a lot on, is because let's just get into it. He says, I do think the toxicity toward some of our own players in Oklahoma City is spurred on by some of the more prominent media figures who run pods. There's a lot of discourse that is weird on here. One wrong step and everybody is attacking blank player and anytime they can. And I think he's right here, man. I think why we came and started this whole podcast was to start looking at it like 82 wins. Like you started in the beginning of this pod, 82 wins. How do we turn into every single loss a win? And that is how we've been starting and running this podcast. And I look at the first 20 games of the season. It's not necessarily where I thought we would be before Chet went down. And it's most certainly wouldn't be. It's not where we would be if Chet was here. But what we've learned from Poku this season, what we've learned from J-Dub, what we're learning from Dort right now. He only played 14 minutes last night, or the other night. You know what? Like, these guys are tired. They're worn out. And it's okay because we had a down night. It doesn't mean we go and have a bonfire and sell everything that we possibly can and burn everything else. Like, that's not what this Oklahoma City Thunder organization is about. It's about making sure that these players have an opportunity to grow. And even though Tre Mann had 25 minutes and went 0 for 9 and 3-pointers and only scored 2 points, I mean, that was a harsh game for him, man. I feel for the guy. And it doesn't mean that we all turn our backs on him and just be like, oh, this is the reason we lost the game and da-da-da-da. Like, listen, Tre Mann was playing last night because he was helping out with minutes. He had a significant more amount of minutes than he typically has, and he didn't shoot well, but it didn't mean he threw up and just stopped and didn't do anything. He had 2 steals. He had 5 rebounds, and he just was active everywhere else. So I look at this and I say, what we saw the other night with, the 7 guys from the bench that we had, the 12-man rotation, I'm proud of the guys for going out there and giving it their all and fighting like they did.
Yeah. And we got, like you said, we got to be really optimistic in these types of times because, like, we know the pinnacle of improvement and when you've actually reached your goal is when you're consistent, right? Like being able to play good 1 or 2 games, like the Rockets, that's 2 wins in a row. I was listening to the Rockets announcers and over again, they're like, this might be the first winning streak of the season. First back-to-back games we've won all season, right? Like, it's not that the Rockets can't go out there and play well, but are they consistent? And they're a long ways away from being consistent. We've demonstrated more consistency this season, but there are these trap games, and we just didn't play up to our potential. But as fans, we have to look at it and, like, we don't want to be like, if the team is out there making excuse after excuse after excuse, that would be hard to defend as fans. But we want to make those excuses as fans. And I shouldn't use the word excuses, but we should remind each other of the reasons that these types of games are difficult to win for young teams. They're difficult to win for older teams. But for a young team, like, this is the type of consistency that you need if you're going to be able to expect playoff success. Because this is very similar to a playoff type situation where back-to-back overtime games, you win game 7, and you immediately have to go in and play against somebody who has been waiting on you, and they have a point to prove. And you can let game 1 slip. We saw the old version of the Thunder. Winning game 1 wasn't necessarily a sure thing, but giving a hell of a series was. And we lost the first 2 games in a couple of series that we ended up coming back and really, one of them we beat the Spurs, and then the other one we made a hell of a series and the Spurs ended up getting us. But I know that next step of improvement is consistency. So we see the moments, but yeah, the shots weren't falling. And like you said, does that mean that it's a fire sale? No, man. We just got to recognize that this is a part of cheering for a young team. And as far as people who are aggressive to be pushy about this team winning right now, for whatever reason, maybe they bought tickets, maybe they made some bets, I don't know. But they're the same people who were saying, cheering for the team to lose previously. The people who have been consistent and are like, hey, we know where we're at. It's going to be difficult, but we can get some wins. We can improve, and we can improve, and it's going to be a long-range plan. They're not the ones getting anxious and impatient. The people who are getting anxious and impatient were the ones who ignored it or cheered for the team to lose, then suddenly felt like, hey, this team could be good, which they can be, but it doesn't mean that on November 28th, you're just blowing everybody away. There are plenty of teams. Last year, there are 2 teams in particular that started out incredibly fast. The Bulls and the Cavs in the East. And it was just whoa, these teams, their fan bases started talking about titles. Fucking titles. Or at least, conference championships and making deep playoff runs. And I'm like, you guys are skipping a lot of steps here. Right? And for us as fans, we have to recognize when you see dead legs, let's just fucking call it dead legs, young team. That's it. We don't have to overthink this,
Yeah, and all those people that are like, oh, but in order for us to win, or in order for Shai to get the All-Star nod, right?
Yeah, but that's artificial.
Listen,
right?
Listen, right?
I'm listening.
I went back and I did some research, and I found it was quite crazy. If Shai comes into it averaging 30 points a game, right?
Yeah.
Do you know 60 of the last 62 players that come into averaging 30-plus points a game have made it to the All-Star game? Okay? The 2 players that did not were Walt Chamberlain and one other guy. Not too sure who it was, but it was in the 80s. And they both were injured. Okay? So all those people that are like, well, we need Shai to win in order for Shai to get recognized. It's not the case right now, guys. All of the third All-NBA team for Shai right now is a win for him.
Sure.
I don't care. He doesn't need first team All NBA at this point of his career. It would be great for him to have, but there's no pressure on that for him. We don't need to be saying he needs this, he needs this, he needs this, because Shai is going out there and doing what he's doing. He's at 32 points in 28 minutes, man. This is what we need Shai to be doing.
Dude, you're right. And we got to look at it like that. As a team, we know that internally they don't count a win personally. They count wins as teams. So Shea's not like, oh, I hit 32. It was a good game for me. Everybody else failed. No, right? They look at this as a team thing. Giddey's not like, oh, I got a triple-double, but everybody else sucked, so, I got the win. Nope. So my whole point is, as fans, we sit there and we go, hey, this is a win even though we lost. This is a win even though we lost. And some people don't like that, especially in a culture like Oklahoma, where it's really about football. And generally speaking, one loss can be the difference between your chance at winning a championship or not. Like that's the reality of college sports. And it was done fairly like that for a long time because a lack of a bowl system and it still leaves people, on the outside looking in. But my point is simply that one loss isn't the end of the world when you're watching basketball and there's 82 games. It never can be. Even in a situation where a team like we saw Russ and Denver knocked the Nuggets out of the playoffs, right? It wasn't the end of the world. They gave them a standing ovation, even though they weren't able to go watch their team make it to the playoffs. That was painful, but understanding the reality that this is not college. This is not NFL football. This is basketball. And with basketball comes improvement.
We're not in a win now mentality.
No, and even if we were, you still would see teams in a win now mentality walk right into landmines. I mean, going back to football, like the Eagles have had a hell of a season this year, but their one loss, right, to the Commanders, who have had probably one of the worst, seasons in the history of football this season.
They're doing all right. They're actually
as far as distractions, as far as where I think they were winless at the point when they beat the Eagles, right? Like it was a tough situation. My point is, you're not going to judge the Eagles based on their one loss. Right? And we shouldn't be getting caught up in that game. Now, I'm going to turn to a comment on YouTube because Chris and all of our friends on YouTube, especially from Australia, have really taken the time to educate us about some of the nuances to Giddey's game that we may not be familiar with and what it how it resembles some of their, national sports, particularly footy, AFL, football. So, I mentioned in the last episode Josh Giddey's offensive rebounding and his approach to offensive rebounding and him picking his spots, going to where the ball is, and really just like at key moments in the game deciding we're going to shoot it until we make because I have that ability to impact the game. And because he picked his spots, teams aren't really prepared for the level of offensive rebounding he suddenly puts on. Anyway, so here's what Chris said. He says his offensive rebounding game is equal to pure Australian rules football AFL aerial game. So I'm not familiar with the aerial game. So this is more for me to get on and learn. I've done this a few times when Chris, other people have mentioned, check this part out. This is what Josh is like. He goes on to say he, when choosing his spots and times, hunts the offensive boards like he's playing Aussie rules when the ball is in the air. Then he writes like Montana going to Rice. And then he throws in Poku equals the next Giannis. So there's a lot to unpack there, but let's start with the Aussie rules stuff. Hey, I see it. I see Josh is like attacking, right? Attacking where the ball is heading as it's heading there. It's not like like a lot of people like offensive rebound. He's like moving toward it. Like if you want to think the equivalent of like a really good defensive player when there's a fumble, right? He's like trying to collide with it, but also take anybody out who happens to get in his way. So the timing is just like poof, captures the ball, goes up all in like one motion that's so unfamiliar to me. So there's that. I know you want to say something about that. And then Montana Rice, Poku, Giannis. I don't know what you got.
I mean, like, I'm all for these guys starting to recognize how good, and I say these guys, I'm talking about the entire NBA. The love that Poku is getting right now is truly spectacular. It's something that I take a lot of great pride in, is because when we started this podcast, one of our first draft pick that we talked about was Poku. Like he was the guy that we talked about a lot about. I was excited about him. I see these flashes, and then all of a sudden he would go like 0 for something on, in a game and have like 5 turnovers, and everybody just trash him, And it's like, you guys forget that he's still a teenager at that point. Now he's a 20-year-old young man, and he's starting to understand the game, and he's had 3 years to develop his game in the NBA. And everybody's being like, oh my God, this guy could be really special and could lead the NBA in blocks, could do this, could do that. And it's all the things that we've been saying before. So when you look at Josh Giddey and you're saying, okay, well, Josh Giddey's different. Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying there, guys. But Josh Giddey has to have this time to develop. Like Mark said, his game is a completely different game than we've ever seen before transaction into the NBA because of his footy experience in the AFL, that he loved to play footy when he was younger. So we're seeing this transition into the game, and I can't help but to stop and just have to observe and watch, because sometimes when people are like, oh, this is an awful decision, I go back and I watch the play. Like, why did Josh make a decision to pass here? And, what was the decision here? Like coaches do, inevitably. And it's crazy because most of the turnovers that he has, right, it's by half a step. It's a half a step. And it's like, holy shit, if that wasn't, if that, pass was half a step more in front of him or half a step behind him more, like either way, it's that close. And when you see a player that's that close to being able to put everything else together, you can't help but get excited about it, because we saw that with Poku. He was that close putting things together. Now he's putting things together, and it's like, oh my God, this player can really play. It's the same thing with Josh. He's so close, but he just needs a little bit of time and development, especially into this new rule. Last year, he played point guard. That's what we expected him to play. This year, he's playing a small forward position. I mean, that's a completely different ball game. And I love it, man. I love the fact that we're playing him. I know we don't play position basketball, but he's playing a lot of small forwards on defense.
Right.
And because of that, I feel like it's one of those things where it just takes time. And
right.
I understand
and when you say that, when you say like he's this close, it just takes time. Really, the reason like that resonates is because you can't practice game speed, game intensity, right? So if he's doing these moves, it's because some version of that move was successful in practice, right? So his shot was successful in practice, but now he has to go out there and do it at game speed, game intensity with 20,000 people in the arena or whatever, 16,000. And then on top of that, a couple 100,000 people watching, maybe a potential of millions of people watching if you end up unchecked in a full. And that's a lot of pressure for all of this. But at the same time, you're saying he's this close. And once again, you can't be this close that young and not eventually, figure it out.
Break through.
So let me ask you, like, with Poku, with Giddey, like, let's start with Poku, though. How far do you think we are? Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, I gave up on Poku, and now Poku's pretty good. I don't want to get carried away. But how far, since you're kind of like the leader in the Poku, like you started the whole big shot Poku phrase and all these different things, like how far is he from the best version of himself? I know sometimes we talk about the NBA players don't enter their prime until like 26, 27. Like, what about Poku? Where do you think his prime is? What age?
Well, the way he plays defense, the way he understands the game, I have a hard time not seeing that at 24, Poku is going to be an all-star caliber player.
All right. So around 24, you think we're going to start to get a glimpse of, like, really what Poku will be in his prime?
I mean, dude,
like,
I could be wrong, but I just look at
it's cool.
Next
like, let
year.
me ask you, like, similar.
Let's look at
Giddey.
next year.
Okay.
Let's look at next year. All right, with Poku. Next year, next to Chet, is the learning year, right? They've got to figure out their mesh together. And then it's the year after that, okay? So the year after that, he's 23 years old. That's my opinion, 22 years old. That's my opinion, that when you're looking at 22 to 24-year-old stage, he has to be making himself known. By 24, all-star caliber, because by 22, he's making himself known as one of those players you have to have out there. 24 is his capital. I mean, that's his second contract. That's where he wants to be anyways. I mean, our third contract. That's where he wants to be.
So what about with Giddey? You think it's about the same age, like where we start to see that?
No, I think Giddey next year is going to be. I think the second half of this year we're going to see Giddey understand his role better. I think he's going to step up more as that second leading scorer on the team, a more consistent scorer than somebody like Dort right now. But Josh Giddey, though, in my opinion, second half of the season's it for him. Like, if he can pull this together and understand that role better, we're going to see a different side of Josh. And then as he morphs into that next year, his third season, we're going to see Josh truly understand and truly get it. And that next stage is going to be special, because if you're looking at Chet and Josh and Poku and Dort and Shea, I mean, we're talking about a crazy group of young guys going out there at a very high level.
Absolutely. So a couple of things somebody on YouTube, Thad Bond, said. He said, great. Top quality Thunder content. Thanks, guys. And we appreciate that for sure. The second comment he made was this. I just hope Josh can fill out his game more throughout the season. I really want to see him start creating his own shots outside of the paint. So with that in mind, first of all,
yes.
Yeah. Go ahead. You go first.
I want to see that too, but we can't get ahead of ourselves, because that's going to come in time. Like, if we're trying to force him into a third and fourth year moves right now, that's not what he needs. He needs something where he's coming in and understanding the system better, and then he's focusing on everything else, because our system is not as easy as it looks. It's really not.
I feel like it broke down against the Rockets, and I think back to the Rockets.
Tired, man.
We were tired, but let's face it.
When you shoot 22% from 3-point range, like
yes, we're tired, okay, and I get that, right? Our timing was off, okay. Our cuts were mistimed. People weren't filling, behind a cutter to the 3-point shot, as quickly. Things weren't as crisp, okay. But, and I'm sorry to just hijack it and go back to the Rockets thing, but let me just say something. I think that defenses in the NBA are really starting to decide that they're going to play, like something I heard Ryan Hollins talking for the Rockets over and over and over again with Shea, which is boxes and elbows, which I was unfamiliar with it. That ultimately is box and one, which I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I know box and one. But boxes and elbows basically is you're going to put a lot of pressure on the man, and then he's going to have to get through 4 other players to get to the basket. Was that what they were doing against us? That's what it seemed like. I mean, it seemed like they were just in a straight up box and one when Shea had the ball. Okay, so we could just be like, okay, throw this film away. There's nothing we can learn. We were tired. But I think that there's something there. I think what we're looking at is an evolution of how people are going to choose to defend Shea. And and when this kicks in, okay, then it becomes what happens. And I alluded to it the other day, but the hardest thing in sports is when teams come up with a game plan to stop you. Then you got to figure out how to overcome that. And look, it's going to be a series of things, but I'll say this: we've kind of been like, hey, there's certain counter moves Shea can go to, yada yada yada. But in the end, if you're playing in crowds, if they're sending 3 defenders at you when you pick the ball up and stuff like this, there's no specific counter move that is consistent in those situations. There wasn't for Michael Jordan. There wasn't for Kobe Bryant. Like, they all had the ability to rise up. But in the end, right, like, the best move is the pass out of the double team, triple team, quadruple team. Like, if all 5 players are hunting you and you have the ball, you got to find a way to get the ball out. And the most important pass is not the pass you make, right? It's the next pass. Because the hockey assist is really what you're going for here. You're not looking for that, and I shouldn't even say it because, all hail Russ and everything. But, Russ was always hunting for the assist out of the post if he was posting, or if he was, wherever he was hunting the assist. You got to hunt the hockey assist. You got to take the easy pass, let the next guy set up the guy on the skip pass. That's the strategy that works if they're going to be sending that there. So this is an evolution. I'm sure we're going to study the film. Like, sometimes I've heard Coach say we just threw it away, right? But look, it's a hell of a strategy. And I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't thought, hey, teams are about to box and one Shea. But then I'm like, back when I was coaching, if I had somebody that was like that, like, it's one thing if somebody's just torching you on the perimeter It's another
Man,
thing if they're just
how
embarrassing
did
you
you
interior.
coach? How did you coach against boxing one?
How did I coach against boxing one?
Yeah.
Well, it depended on the level of the player, right? If like sometimes I would see teams like bury a guy in the corner, and I felt like that that just kind of meant they accepted, a 4-on-4 game, and that's fine. But like personally, I thought if you could get kind of like what I'm saying, I didn't have a lot of players that were at an extremely high level, but a couple of the players I coached ended up going to college and stuff like that, right? The idea would be to put pressure on the defense from the top of the key with the person who had the box and one. Now, obviously, a good box and one wants to deny you full court. So if they can take the ball out of your hands, they don't want to let you give it back up. But if through proper cutting and different movement, you can get the ball back, then at the top of the key, the defense will break down with anything, any level of penetration. There's going to be an open shot as long as you're not the one trying to take that shot. So really, if you take the and bury the guy, the girl in the corner and say, don't take a shot, don't do anything, just get back on defense whenever, maybe cut after the person, has drove. It doesn't really do a lot. But if you can be like, hey, keep that movement going and we're going to engage with them, but on our terms, right? We don't want you playing 1-on-5, but we sure as hell don't want to take away the fact that they're so scared of you from our, like make them be coiled up like a spring and then just, utilize, I don't know, like there was some things you could do, like put the person at the high post, but to me it was always about getting them,
No,
NBA
listen,
three-point line extended.
It's simple. All right. We watched Coach D do it last night. It's the same thing that I would do when I would see a box and one type of mentality on offensive player. Is you get your box in one guy and you have him penetrate to the hole. Well, what do you mean? Well, it's simple. When you go 3-on-1, knowing that you're going to dish the ball out to a wide open 3-point shot, it's simple. Now, last night, our 3-point shooters were cold as shit. It's unfortunate it happens in game, but 0 for 9 and 2 for 7 to what I would consider our best shooters on the team is not something that you want to hang your hat on. So if those guys were hitting, they couldn't have been playing boxing one anymore because you're making.
Well, yeah, you
making
can definitely
decisions.
shoot them out of a situation like that. But
that's what we saw last night. That's what we saw.
Here's what I would say.
But the penetration we saw from Josh Giddey still, right? The dedication to what Shea and Josh were doing was key. Like we saw Wiggins do the same thing. Penetrate to the hole. We need these guys to be doing this.
But understand that you're going to be playing in a crowd once you get there. And I feel like
exactly
it wasn't necessarily a lack of kicking it out, although I definitely think there was times where like we were so committed to getting downhill that we didn't accept the fact that like there are certain, like any zones, there are certain soft spots. And if you get to that soft spot, then you can draw more people instead of having to go into an attack mode from that spot. Then you can start kicking the ball out. I didn't see that happening, but the reason I didn't see it happening much to me wasn't because the guys weren't willing passers, but it was because the cuts weren't timed properly. The cuts weren't to the right places. The cuts weren't clean. And if you think like this is the simplest thing to think about, but like you end up kind of in like some version of the triangle offense. And the key is like the way Michael Jordan would kick the ball out when he had all that attention. The kick out is straight out to the wing. It's not like this cross court pass.
Yeah, it's
a simple pass.
It's right next to you.
It's the easy pass. Then you're taking advantage of
everybody else
space.
Running to catch up.
Everybody. And that's where the person on the perimeter has to recognize his job is to create the window. And it felt like they were like moving to spots that weren't necessarily open. Moving to spots that
it's the young kids move.
Right. And that's what I think we can learn. That's why I don't think this is a throw the film away type game, is because there's going to be this type of spacing until Shea proves, or the team proves more than Shea.
Boxing one scored 32 points on 12 for 21.
Yeah, but here's the thing. There was a lack of, like when he would get to the second level of the defense, there was a third level. And that was where I thought he was a little bit like caught off guard as the game went on. And I know 32 points, but at the same time, like, it's a strategic thing, right?
Yeah.
This is
and
throw bodies at him, right?
Watching Josh Giddey and Shea, they passed a lot to the 3-point range, which obviously wasn't working last night. But one thing I'm going to say is J-Dub, man, he understands where people are going and how to get them the ball the easiest possible way. He had 4 assists. Great job. I know we're not supposed to get stuck on this game, but I just get overwhelmed with J-Dub and the way that he's playing right now. I understand that, you know, there's going to be learning moments, but he's proving that he deserves a nod. And if you look at this team when we're healthy, whether it's J-Dub or Poku or, you know, add in the blank there to that 5th starting spot, man, it's going to be really fun to see these guys hustle out and really work for that, because it's going to be exciting what this team is capable of when we're truly healthy and out there playing with experienced veteran players, because next year you start looking at this team as a more veteran team.
Yeah. I think at this point we can now safely say that we expect improvement year over year. Not that anybody who really pays attention wouldn't say that, but like there was, you know, I think there was a loud group of people who said that maybe the group that we had wouldn't be the group we had when we were winning. And these guys have all made a case that they want to be there when that happens. That even though maybe they're young, maybe they have had to, you know, change their game quite a bit, they're at the point where they can contribute to a team that's ready to take the next step. So it's exciting to see those young players that a lot of people were like giving up on, like assert themselves and say like they want to be a part of this future. So that's why we get excited about Bazley going out there the other night and putting up 17 points in overtime win. That's why we're talking about Poku so much. Like, yeah, it's fun to watch Shea. We got to give Shea credit. Shea's great. And we got to watch him become great. But we know as a team we're not going to win until these next guys start taking the next step. Now, you can just yell at them and hope that they figure it out, or you can recognize that it's going to come one game at a time. It's going to come one season at a time. And if you're like, okay, this is just a starting point for a lot of these younger guys, then you can get really excited. If you're like, oh, this is just the shit team we have, and this is what Shea has to tolerate, and it's why we can't see Shea rep OKC at the All-Star game is because of these other guys and all that. Well, like, that's fine. You're missing out. And you're the same people who missed out before, and that's fine. There's something special going on right now. We know that. We believe in that. Everybody who's watching believes in that. Like, our fan base is way more excited than our record would indicate they should be. But it's because we know we just went through some dark times, but like they say, it's always darkest before the dawn. And we're starting to see some of that light, and that light at the end of the tunnel is enough to get everybody fucking excited, man.
Yeah, and we got a big game against the Pelicans tonight, and I'm pretty stoked about that game because this is a really good indication of what this team is going to be capable of doing. Because if you look at the Pelicans and the way that they're designed and made, it's a true young group with a very, very thick bench. And I kind of dig it, man. I like how they have everything going for them. And I know it's not perfect over there, but when you look at a team, the construction, you want to look at it now is you've got your stars, you've got your role players, and then you got a really solid bench. And that to me right now is what it's going to take to be a contender in the next 3 years. When, you know, KD and all these other guys, LeBron and everybody else is getting to that age that, okay, they're moving on from the NBA. Well, when that happens, it's fucking over, bro, because it's the team that's the most well-rounded, most well-constructed team, not who has the best superstars. That's not the way it's going to be anymore. It's the new wave of the NBA, and we're watching this organization design and mold towards that. And that's what, to me, is the most powerful, most exciting thing about what we're seeing, is that it's not necessarily fun to watch, and it's sometimes super fucking raw, and it's like fucking with sand all around. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not comfortable sometimes, and like, or you know, you get sand in your ass crack, you know, and like you're walking around all day and you can't get it out. Like, it's sometimes it's not necessarily comfortable. You know, it's uncomfortable. It makes you feel weird and awkward. But the point is you get to that point and you recognize it's worth it for that little bit uncomfortable. It's worth it. And when it all comes out and this Oklahoma City Thunder team and everybody's starting to see that this Jang player is better than people realize, and JRE and J-Dub and J Will and Isaiah Joe and Trey Mann, and everybody is in sync and working well together, there's going to be no better team in the NBA than this team, and it's going to be fun. So why are we telling you to keep on watching and keep on staying tuned even though we're 8-12? Is because we're watching this team become who they're going to be in the future. And it doesn't mean everything's going to click every single game, but when it clicks like they clicked against the Bulls, it's good. It's fun to watch. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it is. Man, we enjoy it. We have a lot of fun. We know, like, games like the Pelicans, like, tough team, tough situation for this Thunder team. They want to come out and prove some stuff. We're excited about watching that happen. But we recognize, man, we promised ourselves we got to get to Christmas before we start assessing where we really think this season's at. Like, anything before then, like, you can start off really hot, you can start off slow, it doesn't matter. Like, right around then, we'll decide what it looks like whenever we're like, hey, that's what success means for this team. So stick with us, man. We appreciate everybody joining us. Man, get ready for it, bro. I got my jingle bells out. You know what I mean? Christmas is almost here. I was thinking about it, like, normally I'm like,
just so we're just
go ahead, dude.
Yeah, man, just so we're clear, I'm totally cool with butt stuff, right? But
Okay.
when I was talking about having sex on the beach and I was talking about getting sand in the crack, it kind of sounded a little weird. Like I was getting the one being fucked up the ass with sand. But we're good. We're good. I just want to clarify, I'm not the one getting fucked in the ass with sand right now.
That's good. I was going to say something else, but I can't say anything else now.
Dude, come on. Don't leave me hanging.
That's it. That's what can I even say after that? So, thanks for joining us, everybody. We will be back hopefully tomorrow. We'd like to record after a win if we get it done, but
fuck yeah.
No promises, just hopes and dreams. Thanks for joining us. We will see you then. Peace out.